it all behind you. I said, take down everything that stands in your way. Don't stop believing it'll work out again, my friend. Stand out and be a part of everything good. Wake up, you're gonna be all that you should. Try out all the things you always wanted to be. You'll see, 'cause I know what I know, that you've got it in you, and I see that you are a winner.
Well, ladies, I think the time is coming fast where you can kiss your status as a full and equal human being goodbye, because Christianity is paving the way for Islam in the United States. Rather like John the Baptist plowed the field and got it ready for the coming of Jesus. So Christianity is preparing the United States, the mentality of the United States, for the arrival of Islam, the full blossom of its flower. Because more and more, if you look at the changing laws in this country, driven by Christian Republicans who think that women should be something to control because that's what their religion has taught them since infancy, you will notice more and more states are making abortion illegal. Basically depriving a woman of her right to choose what happens to her body. She's a free and equal human being. Oh, sure. Until she gets pregnant. Then she becomes government property. And apparently, if she has a husband, his property too. She becomes something less than human. She becomes breeding stock. Never mind the fact that the world is grossly overpopulated already. She becomes breeding stock, and her feelings, her desires, her dreams and hopes and ambitions fall away and become second priority to the possibility of life that has been started. I mean, I can totally see the day when it's going to be illegal for men to have sex unless they want to be producing a baby. That's the direction. But then again, maybe not, because it seems like men are never the target for these kind of things. It's only women. Christianity seems to target women, just like Islam does. And people who laugh at the idea of Shari'a law coming to the United States, look around in the United States right now, in various states in this country. Seems to me Shari'a law is already here, being enacted by Christianity, which is the big brother to Islam. They basically are very similar. They both come from Judaism. They both are patriarchal cults that seek to squash women and make women be little whatevers that men control. I see it happening in my country. And I don't see it's very far of a stretch to imagine Islam taking the reins and making it even worse after Christianity has gotten the ball rolling, which it has gotten the ball rolling. A video that very accurately describes what the world, or at least America, would be like to American women should the anti-abortionists, or basically anti-women getting to have a choice what happens to them, succeed. It's a video of a video, so pardon the poor quality.
The media narrative and the political narrative that come up in the last 24 hours in response to what Donald Trump said yesterday about abortion and what it means to be anti-abortion, what it means to want to ban abortion in this country. It is so out of touch and so facile right now, it is mind-bending. I mean, reporting on what the anti-abortion movement is, reporting on that movement's aims, reporting on what it means to be a pro-life politician doesn't just mean writing down what they want you to say about them. You don't have to use the antiseptic language and chosen phrases they choose to use themselves when they describe their own position. You don't have to talk about them only the way they like to be talked about. when you talk about them in terms of their actual policy goals in an objective way, you very quickly realize that what Donald Trump did yesterday, it may be viewed as a gaffe, but it wasn't a gaffe, right? He just used blunter language than the anti-abortion movement likes to use in public. And let's just get real about this for a second. If you are pro-life, that means you don't think a woman has a right to have an abortion if she wants one. If you're pro-life, you mean that that means you think there isn't a right to get an abortion. It means you are anti-abortion. If you're anti-abortion, it doesn't just mean that you don't get an abortion in your own life. It means that you believe nobody else should be able to get an abortion either. When a politician says that he or she is pro-life and will govern as such, what that means is that they would like abortion to be outlawed. It means they want the United States of America to be a country in which getting an abortion is a crime. If getting an abortion is a crime, that means anybody who gets an abortion is a criminal. Follow me here. That is what Chris Matthews was getting at with Donald Trump. And this is what he admitted to. It's so upset everybody that he said it out loud, but it's true. If we become a pro-life country where abortion is illegal, then every time any woman becomes pregnant in the United States, she will face a government mandate which says that she must bring that pregnancy to term and she must give birth by order of the government. The government will use the criminal law to monitor every pregnancy in this country and to force every woman in America who gets pregnant to take that pregnancy to term and give birth, even if it is against her will. That's what it means in brass tacks. It means if you're a woman in America and we become a pro-life country because the anti-abortion side wins, that means your pregnancy test is potentially criminal evidence. If you have a miscarriage, God forbid, every physical aspect of your miscarriage is potentially criminal evidence. The site of your miscarriage is potentially going to be treated and investigated as a crime scene. In a pro-life country, if the government knows you to be pregnant and you do not give birth 9 months later, that will be a matter for the police to investigate. Donald Trump says he is pro-life. The Republican Party has generally viewed him as a squish on the subject, as not hardline enough on abortion. As an example of how he's not hardline enough, in contrast, Ted Cruz is not only anti-abortion, he is anti-abortion in every instance. Under a President Ted Cruz, he would go further than Donald Trump and impose the same criminal regime, not just on women broadly, but on specifically women who became pregnant because they were raped or because they were the victim of incest. So some, God forbid, right? Some 13-year-old girl somewhere in America gets raped by her evil uncle and gets impregnated. Under a Ted Cruz presidency, if he gets his way, that 13-year-old girl's pregnancy would become a matter for the state, for the government to monitor. And the criminal law would be used to force that 13-year-old girl to bring that pregnancy to term, and it would force her to give birth to her rapist's child against her will under penalty of criminal law. So it sort of feels like a parallel universe, right? In which these comments by Donald Trump yesterday are seen as somehow outrageous, while Ted Cruz is the reasonable one.
There has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
10 cents, 10 years,
I don't know.
The anti-abortion movement in this country does not like to talk about that part of what their agenda would mean for our country. The anti-abortion movement in this country does not like any public reminders of the links between their movement and the part of their movement that shoots doctors and says it's justified to do so. But presidential candidate Ted Cruz has not been particularly diligent about keeping a bright line between his own anti-abortion politics, his own anti-abortion campaign, and the radical, violent anti-abortion politics that have brought us the Operation Save America and Operation Rescues of this world. His opponent, Republican presidential frontrunner, Donald Trump, he has not been particularly good at keeping a bright line between what he wants to be seen as mainstream anti-abortion Republican politics and the politically awkward but true fact of what it would mean for American women if the Republicans get their way, the anti-abortion movement gets their way, and they succeed in making abortion a crime and every American woman who seeks one into a criminal. So, just a note to the national media and to the Beltway media on this subject. I know everybody's all over Donald Trump on this. What will this mean for his campaign? But covering a story like this does not mean just writing down what people want you to say about them in the terms they want you to use. And the idea that there's any distance at all between what Donald Trump said yesterday on this subject and the aims of the anti-abortion movement in this country, that is a fallacy.
And if you don't believe that it's actually happening, and you're too lazy to actually look and see how many states have made abortion illegal in this country, basically making it a criminal offense. Here's an example of a woman named Paving Patel, and I probably mispronounced her name, and an article that was put up, if I can find the date, which I can't. Oh, March 31st, 2015. So this is actually a year old. So this isn't even recent. On Monday, the state of Indiana sentenced 33-year-old Paving Patel to 20 years in prison. Let's think about this for a minute. 20 years in prison. I have heard of murderers, cold-blooded killers, who get 5 years in prison. But she gets 20 years in prison. Interesting. At least she's not being flogged 1,000 times or stoned to death. But, you know, that could just be around the corner. Because all we have to have is Islam and Shari'a law to step in. Okay, I'll try not to interject, but I'm very angry right now. So, you know me, interjection happens when I'm upset. On Monday, the state of Indiana sentenced 33-year-old Paving Patel to 20 years in prison on charges of feticide, an act that causes the death of a fetus. So in other words, I'm interjecting, going on a carnival ride when you're pregnant that might result in a miscarriage, that would make you a criminal. Or taking a medication that you don't realize is harmful for your pregnancy could make you a criminal. Or ingesting something that you don't realize could be harmful. I mean, there's a whole slew of things that could be harmful for a fetus that could result in miscarriage. Genetics. Anyway, okay. An act that causes the death of a fetus, because heaven forbid that a fetus is less important than a woman, or rather, heaven forbid that a woman has the same amount of worth as a human being as a fucking fetus. Sorry, interjecting, coming back to the article. And neglect of a dependent. Yes, it's inside you, it's feeding off you, kind of like a parasite, totally unable to live on its own without your body and the nutrients that you ingest, and you're going to call it a dependent. It's a fucking fetus. A potential life. Are eggs in an ovary dependent? Every month when a woman ovulates, is the egg, is it going to become a crime in the near future if a woman doesn't try her best every time she's in the process of ovulating to get that egg pregnant? If she doesn't try to get each and every egg pregnant, is she going to be guilty of murder? What's next? She received a 30-year sentence on the felony neglect charge, 10 of which were suspended. A 6-year sentence for feticide will be served concurrently. Let's think about this. She's 33 years old. Her whole life is being robbed from her, taken from her, because she had a miscarriage. It's not even an abortion. She had a miscarriage. This isn't America. This is the United States. It's happening in the United States. Patel is the first woman in the U.S. to be charged, convicted, and sentenced on a feticide charge. Reproductive rights activists are outraged, you think? What this conviction means is that anti-abortion laws will be used to punish pregnant women, says Lynn Petrell, Executive Director for National Advocates for Pregnant Women. Gee, you know, In Islam, pregnant women are often beat even more than non-pregnant women. I mean, at least that's what the statistics say. Seems to me that the target of women and pregnant women in Islam, seems to me Christianity is doing the same thing. So all those Christians out there who say, well, Christianity is so much better than Islam, maybe not so much. Okay, so let's think about this. You live in a state where having a miscarriage is a crime. So she has a miscarriage and then she tries to hide the fact that she does. I think if I were in Indiana and I had a miscarriage and the possibility of going to prison for 20 years because of something I had no control over, I would probably hide the stillborn fetus in a dumpster too. Sorry, but I would. According to Sue Ellen Browlin, doctor and co-president of the Indiana Religious Coalition for Reproductive Justice. Gee, you know, in some countries, and not even just Middle Eastern countries, in some countries in the UK, you have your religious police patrolling the streets looking for sin, and they'll arrest you if they find it. Now we have, in America, we have the Indiana Religious Coalition for Reproductive Justice. Purvi was most likely 23 to 24 weeks pregnant. Although prosecutors argued Patel was 25 weeks along in the state's opening argument, the prosecution confirmed on Monday that the baby died within seconds of being born. Yeah, because it was a miscarriage. Patel's lawyers argued that she panicked when she realized she was in labor. Patel comes from a conservative Hindu family that looks down on sex outside of marriage, and the pregnancy was a result of an affair Patel had with her coworker. Well, if Islam takes over, she could be stoned to death for that. Purvi Patel's conviction amounts to punishment for having a miscarriage and then seeking medical care. Something that no woman should worry would lead to jail time, said Deepla Liar, activist in residence at the University of Maryland's Asian American Studies program and former director of South Asian Americans Leading Together. Despite Patel's claim that she gave birth to a stillborn child, prosecutors argued that Patel gave birth to a live fetus and charged her with child neglect. Prosecutors also claim that Patel ordered abortion-inducing drugs online and tried to terminate her pregnancy, but a toxicology report failed to find evidence of any drugs in her system. Patel is the first woman to be sentenced under Indiana's feticide laws, but she isn't the first woman to be charged. In 2011, Bai Shuai, S-H-U-A-I, a Chinese-American woman, was held in prison for a year before feticide charges against her were dropped as part of a plea deal. Shuai was reportedly suffering from depression and tried to commit suicide while pregnant. She survived, but the fetus did not. You know, it would have been better, I guess, according to these people, if it was the other way around and she died, but they saved the fetus, because after all, the fetus is so much more important than a woman. Instead of receiving the medical support and counseling Shai so desperately needed, the state charged her with murder and attempted feticide, said Liar. Liar said that the fact that the only two women charged with infanticide are Asian women is important to note, because women of color often lack access to basic health care, counseling, and other reproductive health resources. Immigrant women of color, such as Bibi, and Purvi, remain vulnerable to the exploitation of laws like these in a myriad of ways, as we have seen in how they have been treated by the state of Indiana, says Liar. The cultural issues that the prosecution decided to drag into this case reflect stereotypes about Asian American women and reproductive health, which may not necessarily be true in this case. The Journal of Health, Politics, Policy, and Laws 2013 study on arrests and forced interventions on pregnant women in the U.S. found that approximately 71% were low-income women and 59% were women of color. For these women, the additional fear of arrest may altogether prevent them from seeking critical and necessary physical or mental health care during their pregnancy, says Miriam Yuan, Executive Director of National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. Yuan believes that the Asian American community needs to be more intentional and open about having conversations about reproductive and mental health. Asian American youth, says Yuan, report the strongest amount of stigma around sex and reproductive health of any group. Asian American women also have one of the highest suicide rates in the country. We know that our community is very progressive on the issue of abortion. 78% of AAPIs, Asian American Pacific Islanders, believe in some form of legal abortion, says Yuan. However, despite our supportive values, we are not openly discussing reproductive health. As a community, we need to begin taking steps to destigmatize reproductive health and mental illness and integrate care and service around these issues and into routine medical care. I'll put the link to this article in my description. Here's a more recent article. Cruel Texas Republicans forcing women to deliver dead babies. Let's see, it's dead inside you. Do you think it's healthy to carry a dead baby inside your body? Is that healthy for the woman? Or does it even remotely matter what is healthy for the woman or the woman in general? Is she even remotely an issue or a consideration? Never mind what it does to her mentally, knowing that a baby that maybe she actually wanted is in her body and it's dead. Absolutely no hope of having that child. Not only that, but it delays her ability to try again and have a child if she wants one, because the dead baby is rotting in her body. Cruel Republicans, gee, wonder how many of these cruel Republicans are Christians. This article was put up April 1st, 2016 by R. Muse. Even in extremely dangerous pregnancies, doctors are forbidden to induce labor because Texas considers it an abortion. It's an abortion. Heaven forbid, oh my gosh, that a woman should have the choice to have something inside her or not. World history is rife with instances of cruelty and barbarism at the hands of Christians. But since this is America, it is one of those subjects few are willing to ever mention. Sadly, there is still an inordinate amount of cruelty and barbarism attributable to Christians who also happen to be exclusively American Republicans. Even though they are not beheading or burning their victims at the stake, they are causing undue pain and suffering to other Americans, primarily women. In fact, side note, I'm actually thinking Republican Christians aren't really much different from Middle Eastern Muslims who follow Shari'a law or read the Quran and actually follow its commands. Okay, back to the article. It is all an integral part of their cherished religious liberty, and as is nearly always the case, it is women taking the brunt of the inhumane cruelty. In Texas this week, a prime example of evangelical Republican barbarism was on display. As is usually the case with religious Republicans involved, it was a woman and her husband, both Christians, who were forced to suffer due to Republicans exercising their religious freedom to be merciless and savage. I'm sorry, I don't pronounce words well. The Mahaffey family were desperate for a child and had been praying incessantly for a baby. But when 20-week pregnant Taylor learned her fetus suffered a severe complication, gee, I wonder why she isn't in prison for this. With no possible chance of ever surviving, the young couple cried and then prayed for a humane end to their fetus's suffering. In fact, doctors and the medical staff cried along with the I'm sorry, this is just so stupid. Cried along with the Mahafis. Well, it is sad, actually. They wanted the baby, but it was dying. But praying, that's going to do something. Anyway, I'm sorry, side note. And as usual, God does nothing because he doesn't exist. But anyway, back to the article. Okay, so the medical staff also cried, in part because the couple's disappointment and grief, and partly because Texas Republicans passed a law mandating that the mother and fetus had to suffer because they enacted a religion-based fetal pain law. The doctors informed the young couple that even though the fetus could never survive and would either die in utero or deliver stillborn, the couple would just have to suck it up, stop crying, and let the fetus die in the womb, or endure the full 9 months of torture and deliver a dead baby. If science could prove the fetus died in utero, then, and maybe only then, could the medical professionals legally deliver the carcass because of the religious Republicans' fetal pain law. One night last week, the mother experienced abnormal pain and rushed to the hospital where doctors discovered the fetus's feet were pushing through the mother's cervix. Doctors tried several emergency measures to stop the preterm labor, including a procedure in which doctors stitched shut the cervix. Still, nothing worked, and nothing could save the fetus. It left the Mahafris pleading with doctors for an acceptable and humane option to stop the torture. The doctors told the couple the only humane thing to do would be to pop the sac and let the fetus come into the world and die. However, due to religious laws, thinking again of those religious patrols in the UK, the doctors were forbidden to induce labor, because in Texas it is considered an abortion. And in Texas, abortion is illegal. They sent the couple home to either wait for the fetus to die in utero or for the mother to begin natural labor so they could deliver the dead baby. The religious couple prayed constantly for a miracle that might end their baby's suffering. Sorry, the whole pray to the imaginary thing. I'm sorry. The husband was rightly worried his wife would hemorrhage to death. And despite the mother had started bleeding because the fetus's heart still beat, doctors could not legally interfere. This is going on while the woman was just screaming at them to get the fetus out of her. The young woman suffered like that for 4 days. And after her waters broke, doctors delivered a dead, partially formed baby. Now this cruelty is not down to the medical professionals in Texas. They desperately wanted to help relieve the religious couple's suffering, but the religious Republicans said no. If this were a one-off occurrence, it would be bad and barbaric enough to last a lifetime. But it is not unique. Not to Texas or to any one of 12 other religious Republican states, apparently there's only 12, not 20, that ban abortions after 20 weeks based on the wholly unscientific idea that a fetus can possibly feel pain at 20 weeks of gestation. According to mounds of scientific research and evidence, the American Medical Association, AMA, says that fetal perception of pain is impossible before the 3rd trimester. That is, when a fetus's nervous system is developed to a point it can feel anything. Still, Texas religious Republicans' barbaric and cruel ban on medical professionals helping women was passed as a provision in HB 2. One of the OBGYNs at the hospital where this tragedy of suffering occurred, Bradley Price, had previously testified before Texas Republicans and criticized them for attempting to practice medicine based on religion, and politics instead of sound medical science, he said. This bill is extremely intrusive into the practice of medicine. It risked Texas women's health by denying them the benefit of well-researched, safe, and proven protocols. Dr. Price even took the time to explain that most abortions performed after 20 weeks were on women whose fetuses had some kind of severe deformity or condition that was incompatible with life. He asked the religious Republicans, if you're worried about pain at 20 weeks, what about pain at 40 weeks? Are we going to ask dead or damaged fetuses to go through the birth canal still? Is vaginal delivery out of the question? If you take it to an illogical conclusion, that's where you'll go. The doctors should never have brought logic into the equation because these are religious Republicans. For dog's sake, I like that, for dog's sake, if they take the word of the personhood movement, the Vatican, and the national right to life over established medical science, of course they would choose the illogical conclusion. This is the issue with well over a dozen religious Republican states who all claim that science and biology, like a woman's constitutionally protected equal rights, are irrelevant based on the feelings of the anti-choice barbarians with religious freedom. This incident, although tragic for the young Texas couple suffering a devastating experience, is bound to continue occurring in every Republican state run by theocrats. There is no sound political, economic, or humane reason for acute barbarism and cruelty toward women, except that Republicans regard them as nothing more than objects for birthing. And if the fetus is deformed, incompatible with living, or dead in the womb, religious Republicans demand that the woman still gives birth. Shari'a law, it's really not much worse than what we are already seeing happening in America to women.